Hi everybody, it's Christopher and welcome to Life's Not Over, It Just Looks Different on YouTube. In today's video, I want to talk about all things print, be it font sizes, font styles, letter spacing, line spacing, all of that stuff is what I want to cover today. And I want to start with font sizes. Now, if you watched some of my videos before, you know in the video where I talked about things I did in the early days to recover, I talked about how I was able to keep a sheet that showed my progression of being able to read smaller and smaller font sizes as I got some of my vision back. I started out reading 72-point font when I first came out of the hospital, and nowadays I've leveled out that I'm probably at about 20 or even 18-point font if I want to be able to read things nice and smoothly and consistently. I can read things in smaller font sizes, be it 16, 14, maybe even 12. But not for very long. It's very straining. It takes a lot of work. It's just tiring. So I prefer to have things in about 18 to 20-point font. Now, still on those font sizes, when I was typing my memoir on my computer, I was typing it in 12-point font and I was using double spacing. And I'm going to talk more about spacing in a minute. But the 12-point font double spaced really worked. It was nice and consistent, so that worked out pretty well. But I was using ZoomText to do it. But I was using the 12-point font because that's what I eventually wanted to print the book in. And I've actually gotten a lot of compliments about that people liked that it was a little bit larger font. Some of my mom's friends who are all senior citizens have told me that they appreciated it, that it was in a little bit larger font. And just as recently as a couple of weeks ago, I got an email from somebody telling me that because I had done it in the 12-point Arial font with double spacing, that it was nice and clear. And this person told me in an email that it was the first book she'd been able to read in quite some time without needing any aids to read it. So that was really kind of cool. That was a nice email to get. And sort of a happy accident, really, because I was doing the 12-point font because I figured that was the font size I wanted to print it in. The fact that it's worked out really well for other people, like I said, just a bit of a happy accident. Still on the subject of the font sizes, when I was going back to school, especially in those first few years after my sight loss, I went into the financial services industry and I had to take a number of tests. And I'm going to talk more about this in another video, sort of talking about some of the things I had to do for taking these courses and going to these learning institutions. But one of the things that I did is I had all my exams printed. I know in the early days, in the first couple of exams, they printed them in 36-point font because in those days I was still recovering, and that was about the smallest font size that I was able to manage for any long period of time. I remember later, some of the later exams that I did, I had them reduce it to 28-point font. And that was about as low as we got for those, because after that I was able to, I was no longer taking courses, so I didn't really need them to print it. But yeah, in those early days of taking exams, it was 36 or 28-point font was what I was using. Again, talking about the font style or the font type, I gravitated towards Arial because I found, as I was sort of playing around with things on my computer, that sans serif fonts were really good. So anything that doesn't have extra little curls and wings and whatever on its letters, those are really great. And it wasn't until many years later when I joined CNIB that I found out that I was actually on the right track all on my own. Because in our company standard, when we're sending emails, we are asked to put our emails in either 12-point or 14-point, depending on the font that we're using. And we use either Arial or Verdana font because those are both sans serif and they're very nice and crisp, clean fonts, and the letter spacing's pretty good and that sort of thing. So they both work out really well. Those are the kinds of fonts that I tended to gravitate toward anyway, and the fact that they work out just was a nice little bonus. Line spacing definitely comes in handy. Having that extra 25 to 50% spacing between lines gives a nice clear definition for people with sight loss of what kind of being able to read each line separately and not having them run together if their vision is poor and they have trouble with that sort of thing. So having that nice separation between lines. And also letter spacing. Letter spacing is really important because I remember very specifically, I was working, one of my first jobs in financial services, I was given a checklist to go through with a client, and the document was still relatively new to me, and I remember reading down this list and I was doing really well until I got to this one word, and I was struggling so hard with this one word that it turned out the word was clothing, but what was causing me the struggle was that the C, the lowercase c, and the lowercase l next to each other, they looked like a D to me. They were so close together, letters were so tight that it looked like a D, and so this word didn't make any sense because it started with D as far as I was concerned. Luckily, I had an extremely patient client who's actually a friend of mine who I showed the form to her and she said, "Oh, it's clothing." I'm like, oh, and in my head I felt really dumb and I was like, wow, how could I have not figured that out? But I kept looking at it and thinking, no, it's because the C and the L were so close together, it looked like a D. So letter spacing becomes really important. One other thing that I want to talk about when it comes to print and signage and that sort of thing, or when people are writing things out for people with sight loss, a lot of people think that if they write in all caps, that is easier for us, or if that signage is in all caps, but it actually isn't. As Dr. Roman Lancy talks about in her work, she says that she teaches kids, with CVI, she teaches them the salient features of the different letters, be it uppercase or lowercase. And when the letters, for people with sight loss, and I know I've experienced this myself, that it's actually easier for us if the letters are, if we were typing a document, if it's not in all caps and in just regular, upper and lowercase as needed, because sometimes we recognize the word by the shape of the letters in the word they form. I remember doing this even before losing my sight. I guess maybe my vision wasn't so good, my early 20s even, maybe a little bit, that I remember off in the distance, a bus would be coming down the street and I would I remember looking at the sign and I could tell by the shape of the word if it was the bus I needed. And it's something that's a skill that I still use to this day when I'm waiting for one of the LRT trains in Calgary here. As the train is coming down the road, even before the announcement is made, if I can get a good look at the signage, I can see the shape of the word, and that's kind of whether or not I know that train is mine, even before the train is announced audibly. But don't get me wrong, I do love those audible announcements, and so I don't want anybody to think that it's okay to take those away. That's a discussion for another day as well. But yeah, so nice clear fonts, good font sizes. All of these things come in really handy. Sans serif font, letter spacing, line spacing, all of that kind of stuff. These things all make a huge difference when you're putting together documents for people with sight loss, or kids with CVI or anything like that, because it makes it easier for everybody. And really, in a lot of ways, if it's easier for us, then it's easier for everybody. This is why there's standards being put out there as far as like print guidelines and things, because what's easier for people who have trouble seeing is easier for pretty much everybody. And the last thing I'll talk about is the contrast on the page. I know that when I was writing my memoir, it was very important to me that I knew I was going to use a black font. That was a given. But it was also very important to me that I had nice, clear white paper. I didn't want to have sort of a grayish newsprint type paper for the pages of the book, because I wanted the good contrast between black and white so that it was going to be easier for people to read, nice and crisp and clear for pretty much anybody. And again, that was that was intentional on my part, but I've been really pleased with the number of compliments that I've gotten, particularly amongst senior citizens, actually. A lot of my mom's friends have said to me that they really appreciate that the book was, with that nice contrast of black and white, it made it much more crisp and clear and easy to read. So again, something that I did on purpose, but also because I knew it worked really well for me. Turns out it worked really well for other people. So that was a really nice bonus. That's all I wanted to talk about today on all things print and font sizes and such. By all means, if you like the content in this video, I'd love it if you click like down below. And if you have already subscribed to these videos, thank you so much for doing so. I really do appreciate it. And if you're new to these videos and you haven't subscribed yet, please hit subscribe. Check out some of the other videos that I've already done. And I've got many more things I'm going to talk about, including, I touched on it a bit in this one, but I want to talk more about sort of the educational experience that I had as a person with sight loss. And a little bit of advocating that I had to do, and some of the things that were done for me to help out and make it a little bit easier in school. Not easier grade-wise, but at least a little easier to function and actually, be okay with the material. I want to thank you very much for watching today, though, and I hope you have a wonderful day.